Have you noticed how products are shrinking? All sorts of products. This is part of a kitchen towel. Used to be bigger than that. Probably got more of it too. Bread. I noticed recently that loaves are smaller. And in Lidl the other day I bought a half loaf, silly half loaves now. What's the cause of this? Well, shrinkflation, inflation. The government is spending too much money, we're told. And it's to keep tax. Well, leaving aside all the money that's being squandered on migrants and the Chagos deal and whatever else, that French so-called deal, where does the government get the money? It borrows it at interest. And Rachel Reeves, our moronic Chancellor, keeps increasing taxation. Well, the government doesn't need to borrow money. It can create its own credit. Governments have done this in the past. Broadly speaking, it can print notes, mint coins, or create credit by figures in a book, or nowadays blips in a computer in cyberspace. Why doesn't it do that? Well, it isn't because of any imaginary fiscal rules of Rachel Reeves. It's because the Bank of England won't allow it. In June 2010, I wrote to the Queen suggesting this, and I received a letter from Miss Jenny Vine, a correspondence officer. Dear Mr. Barron, the Queen has asked me to thank you for your letter of 17th of June and say that Her Majesty has taken careful note of the views you expressed. Well, no, that she did. I also wrote to the Treasury. I wrote to the Treasury before the Queen, February 4th, 2010. Wrote to Stephen Timsdown. I'll put a link to my financial reform website. Dear sir, as much as we made of the supposedly newly discovered quantitative easing, the process of creating money out of thin air and giving it to the banks in order for the banks to lend, i.e. sell, as interest, add interest to industry, entrepreneurs and small businesses at their whim. Would it not make much more sense for the government to create this money and lend it direct at low or no interest to the same parties, thereby saving time, effort and expense? This process was recommended by the Australian Royal Commission on Money as long ago as 1937. And it's been done before that, most famously by Abraham Lincoln. Well, there was the Guernsey experiment. You'll find that on the website. Abraham Lincoln and his famous greenbacks, even the Bradbury, the Bradbury pound during the First World War. I had a holding response from Tim's. I wrote to the Chancellor then, Alistair Darling, and I received a response. It partially says, as you mentioned in a letter, with the Chancellor's authorisation, the Bank of England has undertaken a programme of asset purchases financed by the creation of central bank reserves totaling £200 billion. It is important to stress that the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England has operational independence over monetary policy. And please use an objective of maintaining price stability. Yeah, and we get that. There's all sorts of rubbish here. And the bottom line is that at that time, the Treaty of Maastricht, Article 104, bracket 1, said that overdraft facilities or any other type of credit facility with the European Central Bank or with the central banks of the member states or public undertakings of members shall be prohibited, as shall the purchase directly from them by the European Central Bank or national central banks of debt instruments. In other words, Maastricht says we can't do this, and now the bankers are saying we can't do it. Or maybe that's what they're telling Rachel Reeves, but the bottom line is the government doesn't have to keep taxing us to death when it can print money. They could do it electronically. All governments could do this. An alternative is for lenders, investors, holders of government bonds to take a haircut for debt or a certain amount of debt to be cancelled. If this is done in Britain and elsewhere, it will benefit the world economy. Yeah, some people won't be too happy about it, obviously, but these people also pay taxes, and is there any other solution? The bottom line is we have to take the power of credit gradually away from the banks, and we have to stop our governments taxing us to death. Until we do that, this piece of paper will shrink and shrink and shrink. So will your livelihood.